Monika here, clinical hypnotherapist and psychotherapist. Thank you so much for joining me. It's good to be here on this Monday morning. Today I wanted to talk to you about, what happens when therapy doesn't work. Hi Lan, thanks for coming on. So what happens when therapy doesn't work, and what do we do about it, and why doesn't it work, and exploring all those kinds of questions. And so this is something that's really intriguing for me because I do now and then get clients who have been in therapy for a number of years, traditional psychotherapy and psychoanalysis, and they're looking at doing something different because they don't feel like they've either made the amount of progress that they want or have made any progress at all. And so this live isn't about bagging any kind of professional therapist. I myself am a clinical hypnotherapist, which by traditional means might be seen as a bit woo-woo and out there and what have you. But also the other arm of my practice is psychotherapy as well, which is very traditional, very much based in those with those historical figures in psychotherapy. Hi Kimberly, thank you for watching. Hi Suzanne, thank you for watching and coming on board and sharing. So this is sparked by some of those clients that I've had that have come in, have come from traditional therapies, and also there was also another question posed earlier to me today that went along the lines of why I'm doing all the right things, everything's going well in therapy, but and I like my therapist, but I don't feel like I'm moving along. I don't feel like I'm getting any better. Hi Rita, thanks for watching. Thanks everyone for coming on board. And so I thought I'd come on board and give my 2 cents as I like to do. And it is very much from my perspective. And I think my perspective is quite broad, given that I studied psychology almost 20 years ago now, and have continually educated myself in various different disciplines and therapies, and seem to have I would say I've got quite a broad perspective where therapy comes into play. So in terms of when therapy doesn't work, there are quite a number of factors. There are quite a number of factors there at play, which need to be looked at and addressed. First and foremost, what the evidence shows is that, and the research shows that regardless of what methodology or what tools you use, whether it's traditional psychotherapy, whether it's hypnosis, whether it's psychoanalysis, whether it's counselling, yes, you do need a tool and a modality to use. However, what the research suggests is that the interpersonal skills, of the therapist is important. So the therapist themselves has got to have a level of confidence and competence within their own ability and skill, that is somehow conveyed to the client. So if the therapist isn't confident in themselves and their ability to provide a service to the client, that is somehow conveyed and may add that kind of element of doubt in the client. So this is what they call like that white coat effect. You go to the doctors and they say, well, it's doom and gloom, and then you suddenly start feeling sick. And if the doctor says, oh yeah, no, everything's fine, you're like, okay, good, I'll just disregard all of those symptoms. So definitely, the confidence and the competence of the therapist is important, but also, it does lean towards those interpersonal skills of the therapist. So, they're not just empathy, but it's, their ability to build rapport with a client, to show genuine desire to help, and balancing that obviously with those other therapy skills too, and those skills that have been learnt within their modality. Because the thing is that if a client doesn't feel like anyone can help them, then it doesn't really matter how good the therapist is, regardless of their modality. And that's because the client has already, within their own minds, decided the outcome. And so if you're a coach, or if you're a counsellor or a therapist and you're watching this, I'll be suggesting a few things about what you can do later on to ensure that your client does have confidence in you and your ability. So make sure you stick with me till the end, and I'll be sharing with you those few tips to get even greater outcomes with your client from the get-go. So we've talked about interpersonal skills are important from the therapist. Why else doesn't a person get the outcome in therapy? So traditional psychotherapy is a therapy that it typically actually takes years, right? So it's one of those things where you don't just go in and there's a quick fix and then you're kind of out of there. You get a tune up and you're all good. Traditional psychotherapy does look at all of those childhood relationships, what happened early in those imprinting years, where you developed your model of the world, and you developed also your reference, in terms of you and your interactions with the world and your loved ones, namely mum and dad or caregivers. So obviously that kind of therapy isn't an overnight thing. It's not a 5 sessions and you're all good thing. It does take a longer period of time to look at and examine all of those things. Now, what I found is that sometimes, and this is not just typical in psychotherapy, but a number of other therapies too, is that there can be a lack of outcome. So there can be a lack of the client seeking an outcome, and there can be a lack of the therapist also guiding the client to an outcome, or exploring what specifically that client actually wants to achieve in therapy. There can be this assumption that once you start therapy, that's just what you do always, right? So therapy became, I guess, more kind of Hollywood, became a bit Hollywood, with all those movies that, everyone who's anyone always has a therapist kind of thing. And that's just what you do. You just always go to one. So I don't agree with that personally. My personal aim in therapy is to provide a service as quickly as possible and address the core issue as quickly as possible, to provide resources and tools to my clients as quickly as possible, and make them independent as quickly as possible, so they can get their own answers and become psychologically independent as quick as possible. That's really my aim. And that may be different across different therapies, but that's my personal my personal goal as a therapist is to provide a service that is as quick as possible, and to see those results as quick as possible. So it's hard for a client to get anywhere, okay, if they're not focused on, if they don't have a plan for addressing whatever it is, that concern that they came into therapy for. It can sometimes appear to be like going around in circles. So for this particular person that prompted this live had asked, and this was just a general question, they had asked, why isn't therapy working for me? I seem to have really good rapport with my therapist. I feel good when I leave, but I'm feeling not so good when I come back, or I feel like things have been undone, or I've forgotten what's been said, and those therapy tools. And so goal setting is one thing. Okay, that's super important, that you need to have a goal going into therapy about what you want to achieve, what you want to do, how you want to feel, and what you want to be able to do as a result of going to therapy or having these new tools. So that's one thing that I define in the very first session, because I don't want to, I don't want to be taking someone's money and just be talking about the issue over and over again, because I don't see that as helpful. I don't see that as helpful as, talking about the same thing every single session for either part, covering old ground. So it is about, clarifying, what are those outcomes and objectives, and feeding back to the client to see if that's actually realistic for them, okay? Because if it's not realistic for them, well then that's the role of the therapist to actually get that out of them and say, well, hey, is this actually what is achievable within this time frame that you've set? I think also setting those kinds of limits or commenting on time and expectation, as a therapist, you're not doing the client justice, because only the client knows what's within their, I'm not going to say capacity, but what is realistic for them, and what we can help stretch that, we can help stretch that. So Kelly says, I found that the therapist I was assigned after my rape so off-putting that I never went back. Kelly, I'm so sorry that you went through that. I've seen a number of clients who have also been sexually assaulted, and unfortunately they've had the same response, and it's really unfortunate, because it's having to repeat and go over and over the same sort of thing and re-experience that trauma that you went through. It's a significant event, and the great thing is that I've had quite a number of clients that I have had success with, because I've used a different approach. I've explored what went on, once, so one session, and then we've got to work on actually getting rid of that feeling, or getting rid of what it is that they actually want to get rid of. Is it that repetitive thought? Is it the sinking in the stomach? Is it the the flashbacks? So much so that one of my clients gave me the biggest compliment, and she said, Monika, in 3 sessions, I feel so much better. I feel like I've returned to myself again. And these 3 sessions are so far, better than the 6 months of sexual assault counselling that I had with traditional counselling at a sexual assault centre. And so, that it's good that I was able to help in only 3 sessions, but it also gives me kind of a bit of a heavy heart as well, because that lady had to talk and repeat her story and her history and her experience for 6 months. And So this, I mean, this is really the crux of why I'm on here today sharing this with you, because, if something's not working, or if it's not working to, the level that you want it to work, then on both ends, then you owe it to yourself to explore other options, as woo-woo as they might seem, okay? But you owe it to yourself to explore other options. If you are the client who is in therapy and you just don't seem like you just don't feel like you're getting anywhere, have a look outside the box. Have a look outside the box for some other therapy or some other technique that does fit more in line with what you're going through and what you feel. Use your own intuition. Ask around, ask friends, family, say, who have you seen? Who do you know that might be able to help me with this? And likewise, if you're a therapist and if you're providing a therapy to someone and it doesn't seem like it's getting anywhere, or you feel like you're repeating the same story or content over and over again, then that's feedback to you that there is a different approach that perhaps you may have to go down. It may be along the lines of asking some different kinds of questions, some more empowering questions. I know that once I started studying coaching, that the quality of questions that I started asking improved dramatically. Because what ended up happening is that through this kind of line, a different line of questioning, is that the client was able to make their own connections quicker and faster, and I hadn't realized that this kind of implementing this different kind of line of questioning was making a difference until my team leader and at that time said, look, hey Monika, what are you doing differently? All of your clients seem to be, employed, they're working, happy, they haven't gone back to prison, which is all good. They all seem to be kind of moving on and up, whereas perhaps some of the other clients that were also in our team that wasn't working with, some of the case managers were struggling to get through and to make those significant changes. And I put that down to, having those coaching skills and asking my clients a different kind of, a different kind of question, posing it in different ways where they were, I guess, more considerate about their responsibility and about their involvement and their capacity to change their own life. Personal responsibility, not blame, but personal responsibility. So it was more of an empowering conversation. So just getting back to why else therapy may not work. Traditional therapy also is very much, I would say, a cognitive process. It's all up here. You're dealing with how you're thinking, with the mind, how you process things, and sometimes that kind of therapy and that the theory, the basis of that theory, for me, this is my perspective, I find too rigid. It's too rigid because it's all about how you're thinking. It's all about the thought process. It's all, top heavy. Whereas, we are a whole person, and there are many facets to our life, to our existence. There is the cognitive thinking self. There is the feeling self as well. So in terms of how you actually feel on a day-to-day basis, you know, whether you feel, you know, anxious or sad or fearful. And I think that those things, I think those emotions aren't just cleared by just talking about them. Sometimes they're resolved, but other times you need to use a different strategy to resolve that uneasiness. This is where I come from, a different school of thought, and perhaps think differently to some of my mentors and lecturers, where emotions are concerned, particularly the emotion of fear, you know, which the anxiety process stems from that emotion of fear. And so I think talking about fear and talking about what you're afraid of or concerned about over and over again only further embeds the fear even more. And so for me, you know, in my own practice, I've started to incorporate some of the energy psychologies as well. And I'm not saying that that's the right way to go, but I'm just thinking that if it's a body issue, then you need to use body mechanisms. That's my theory. That's how I think right now, and that's what's working for me and for my clients. I don't think that, you know, someone who's experienced perhaps a significant event, you know, or is experiencing you know, something like PTSD or you know, has had a significant event, a tragic event occur to them. I don't think you can just talk it out. Yeah, I think once that energy and once that emotion has been set, you know, in your body, and you are constantly producing the chemicals of that emotion, say, you know, cortisol, adrenaline, then your body adapts to continually producing that emotion and that stress response, regardless of whether that trigger is there or if it's gone. And so, you know, you may have come to terms with what's happened, and that's all fine and good. But if that emotion and if that feeling inside your body is still there, well, then you've got to address the problem where it lies, and that's in the body, which takes a different skill set. It takes a different approach. So, you know, I don't think it should be either or, but definitely, you know, if you are working on issues, and if you are going to therapy for you know, things that have happened to you in the past, or you know, depression or anxiety or anything like that, there is a balance in terms of the intervention techniques as well that, you know, that you can be utilizing. There is the head in terms of processing, in terms of, you know, challenging your thoughts and, you know, trying to think more positively and all of that. But then there's also addressing the emotions that are in the body, because what ends up happening is that you actually interpret what those emotions mean to you. So then there becomes kind of like a loop in terms of how you're thinking, and then how you're feeling, and then you interpret how you're feeling, and then you feel more of that or less of that or what have you. And so both of those elements need to be addressed. That's my personal belief, and that's definitely my personal experience as well, working with thousands of people. And so looking at a therapist who addresses both of those, if that's something that you're going through, if you have those emotionally charged events that you've been through, or emotion is something that you're actually sitting with and you want to get rid of. It's looking at who can actually provide both of those services. So I think it's definitely a problem if the therapy that you're going to is too rigid and is only looking at one of those issues. So it's only looking at the cognitive, and it's not looking at the physical and the emotional level as well. So if you know, in order to get quicker results, in order to get a move on, you know, and to get some sort of outcome and result, the first thing that you have to do is specify what the outcome is. And so this is regardless of whether you're the therapist or whether you're the client, but you in the very first session, in the first session, you need to get an outline of what the outcome is. So what specifically is the person trying to achieve? What specifically do you as a client want to get out of therapy? And so it needs to be really specific. So things like, I just want to feel better, is not specific, yeah? So it could be, you know, that you want to feel better in order that you can do something, right? So then that would be your measure, when you can finally do that. So for instance, fear of flying, yeah, perfect example. I just want to feel calm. Well, you want to feel calm, why? Because I want to be able to take that flight. Fantastic. So then that's the objective. That's one of the outcomes that you want to set. You want to be able to take a flight somewhere. So secondly, if you're in therapy and you've been in therapy for years, yeah, or if you've been for a considerable amount of time and you just don't feel it's working, then I encourage you to consider something else. Because you know what? There are so many therapies, there are so many modalities. We are inundated with so many resources that I encourage you to shop around. Shop around. Have a look, have a research. Like I said, talk to people who have been to a few different therapists and who have tried a few different modalities and see what works. Yeah, I never aspired to become a hypnotherapist. That's not something that I went, yes, you know, it's a long-term desire and a long-term wish of mine. It's something that happened kind of organically because I could see merit in hypnosis. I could see merit in looking at addressing the issue where it lies, and that's in the subconscious. So the more and more I learned and the more I delved into you know, how to address and get to the bottom of the issue, the more for me all paths kind of led back to hypnosis. You know, whether it was through my, you know, life coaching training or NLP training, even in elements of my psychology degree, there was, you know, there was that discussion about the subconscious mind and what role that plays in the day-to-day functioning and processing of the individual. So it is important that you find a therapist that you know, not only that you kind of gel with and align with and that you feel can help you, but that is also willing to try a few different things and a few different modalities. Yeah, because if the modality that you're engaging in, that you're currently utilizing, is not working or is not working to the degree which you want it to work, then, you know, you have so many options out there, and I encourage you to go and explore them. Okay, go and explore them. You know, there's you know, you can Google, but I would definitely recommend that you talk to the people around you and find a good therapist that way. Yeah, I am connected with so many other therapists, and if you don't know who to contact, I have a whole page full that I can put you in touch with. So you know, feel free to contact me, and I'm more than happy to put you in touch with someone. And so yeah, so it's about getting an outcome clear for both the client and the therapist. And if it's not working, it's looking at going, well, hey, if it's not working, we need to either change the strategy, change the approach, or you need to change therapists. Yeah. And also I'd encourage, you know, if you're a therapist and you're watching this and you're using this, to utilize, you know, some of the things I've mentioned here in terms of expanding your repertoire and your skill set of tools, to not only focus on the cognitive but also focus on the emotional, and you know, what tools and modalities can you use to help your clients actually address that emotional feeling. Yeah, what can you use to address that emotion that's inside the body. So I hope that's been helpful for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you for all those people who have joined me, Kelly and Rachel, Joanne. Thank you so much, Rennie, Nikki. Joanne says, woohoo, I'm going into an energy body healing course next week. So excited. Fantastic. Good on you. Wonderful. Yeah, look, and you know, the area of energy psychology is growing even more because of the research that's being done now, which is, you know, we're in a very exciting time because we are gaining more and more research to prove and to support energy healing and also the use of all these other modalities. So we're getting, you know, we're getting you know, more and more information and clarity from, you know, some of those leaders, you know, in the field, who are also scientists and researchers, and you know, so people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, you know, are paving the way. You know, and he uses obviously meditation, guided meditation, which is very much aligned and linked with hypnosis. So, you know, meditation is kind of like, you know, meditating with an outcome, and hypnosis is also, you know, a very calm and relaxing, you know, method to also get an outcome as well. So they're very, very similar. Dr. Bruce Lipton as well. So he wrote The Biology of Belief. So he's an epigeneticist. And he also has that research that suggests that, you know, hey, that, you know, and also is a very big fan of some of those energy psychologies for healing. So it's not just all about, you know, the mind, even though the mind does influence the body, but we've got to, you know, there are more and more of those tools available to us as therapists, and also there's so many more options now available to you as a person who is wanting healing, who is wanting to recover from events, and who is overall wanting to gain you know, a better experience of life, a more enjoyable life. So I hope that's been helpful, you know, to you and encouraging. Thank you so much. I'm getting helpful. Thanks heaps. Inner Siegel workshop, The Secret Language of Your Body. Yeah, absolutely. And Dispenza. Yes, I'm a very, very big fan of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's very thorough with his research. So I do like the science. You know, that's you know, I am still psychology based, and I'm kind of a bit skeptical too about new things. So I'm like, yeah, where's the research? Show me the research. So yeah, I hope that's been helpful. So I do have a question from Darren, who says, you know, what is the expected time frame to achieve an outcome? And you know, and if a therapist cannot provide a solution, why are they charging a fee? And that they are very, very good questions. In terms of the expected time frame to achieve an outcome, obviously it depends what the person has come in for. You know, I know that you know, in the very first session, when I have a session with my clients, we will get to the core issue in the very first session. So in the very first session, we will discover what it is, what the underlying cause is, what the cause is, you know, and then we can, you know, set the time frame in terms of the program that we're working on. I haven't seen anyone for longer than a year. You know, my average program is 12 sessions. So, and that is, you know, and that's an average. So, you know, some will be a little bit longer and some will be a little bit less than that. So, you know, it really does depend on what the outcome that you're wanting to achieve, and also how many things that you're actually wanting to achieve in the therapy, you know, in the therapy relationship. So, you know, for instance, if someone has anxiety, for instance, you know, it's not just anxiety that perhaps they want to address. They might actually want to address some of the coping mechanisms that they've gathered along the way. You know, so there could be some addiction as well that's going on that needs to be addressed. Yeah, so it's not just the anxiety and the feeling of fear or trepidation or the, you know, the constant thoughts, rumination, but it could also be an addiction to a substance as well that needs to be addressed too. There could be relationship issues too as a result of the addiction. So in terms of how long, that's a real hard one to say, but definitely, you know, in my experience, you know, in 12 session, I would be looking at all of those areas, you know, having a drastic improvement, and in terms of, if a therapist can't provide a solution, why are they charging a fee? And that's a really good question too. But the thing is that, you know, that question imposes that the therapist is responsible for the outcome, is 100% responsible, and that really just is not the case. The therapeutic relationship is a two-way street. The therapist has the tools, the resources, you know, the knowledge and the advice. However, it is up to the client to implement those things. So, you know, and so that's a really big ask as well from the client. And so, you know, looking at providing a solution, if a therapist is providing all of that, you know, is providing the advice, is providing the guidelines, the knowledge, the understanding, and also they're really, really specific on an outcome, while they're you know, throughout that therapeutic process, then, you know, my mindset is that yes, there should be changes within that time frame, and there should be those milestones that both the therapist and the client can see along the way, right? And so, hi Darren, thank you for joining. I'm just addressing your question right now, which is, if a therapist cannot provide a solution, why are they charging a fee? So you'll have to re-watch this. But basically, you know, the therapist is providing their expertise, they're providing their advice, they're providing their guidance, and they're providing that sounding board to the client. And ultimately, if the client doesn't receive that, doesn't implement that, doesn't do anything with that in between those sessions, then, you know, the therapist can't be held 100% responsible for that, because ultimately, you know, the client has to, that's their life. They have to come to the party. They have to implement what's the advice that's been put on the table, and give it a red hot go. Yeah, because without changing how they're thinking and feeling, without changing, you know, how they approach life and view themselves and the world around them, then they're likely to get exactly the same results as they got yesterday and the day before and the day before that, and that's where nothing changes. And so there is this reciprocal relationship that occurs between therapist and client, and so the responsibility is really on both of those. So it's a bit of a dance, Yeah. You know, so it's a bit of information, advice and guidance, and then there's a bit of, well, hey, you know, how is the client going to implement that, and what support they need to implement that, and is it realistic for them to execute that. So there is this bit of a dance that takes place, and so you know, in terms of if a therapist can't provide a solution, why are they charging a fee? I think also therapists need to be very upfront from the very beginning, from that very first initial consultation, about whether they actually can provide a solution. Yeah, I think that needs to be upfront then and there. It needs to be on the table, needs to be on the cards. I think it's unacceptable for a therapist just to say, oh, well, we'll try. Yeah, I think there are many talented and skilled individuals and therapists that I'm sure that if you look, we'll be able to say, yes, I have actually worked with clients who are experiencing the symptoms and the things that you're going through, and I have achieved success in those areas. But obviously, it will depend on, you know, your input, your ability to implement those strategies I've put into place, etc., etc. Yeah. So you know, likewise, so it does come back to that reciprocal relationship. There needs to be accountability on both sides as well. The client implementing what the therapist says, and also the therapist looking at, you know, keeping the client accountable, and also looking at what other skills, tools and resources that they can utilize to help the client address, you know, that thing that they're going through, whether it be an event, whether it be an emotional reaction, whatever it is. Yeah, and obviously, you know, if that therapy process isn't working, if the client sees, or if you're a client and you see that you're not actually getting much out of that therapy process, that, you know, there are plenty of therapists out there. There are many therapists. And there are many different modalities that you can try and explore and utilize to assist you to move through whatever it is that you're going through. So I trust that, you know, something in there has been helpful for you. If you're a client and you're listening to this, and, you know, perhaps you are thinking, you know, this therapy isn't working, then I encourage you to get in touch. Like I said, I'm very well resourced and connected in the therapy field, given that I'm a therapist and hypnotherapist myself. There are plenty of therapies that you can try, both the cognitive and also the energy psychologies, and plenty of therapists that are willing to help. And if you're a therapist and you're watching this, I'd encourage you to, you know, look outside the scope in which you were originally trained, because there is much that you can gain from utilizing and incorporating other modalities into your scope of work, and blending them so that you've got more tools and resources to offer your clients. Because it's not just about that cognitive work, it's about looking at the whole person. It's looking at not only how they're thinking, but it's how they're feeling, exploring where they're at spiritually as well. Yeah. And all of those kinds of things, you know, looking at what specifically they actually want to achieve. So I trust that that's been useful. Thank you so much for coming on board. Thank you for your comments, your questions, and your time. I wish you all well, and it's bye from me from now. All right, take care.